I Know These Dictators by Ward Price. Alright, this book was written back in 1933, and it was from a gentleman who knew Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini before they, kind of became famous and the leaders of their respective countries. So we're going to read a few chapters from this because they're not that long, and I think this just gives some great insight on Hitler and Mussolini. So, Chapter 1, Contrast of Character. The world is confronted by a new technique of government. A great development in political history is going on before our eyes. We should study it with an open mind. The fascist and Nazi revolutions are too momentous to be judged with personal bias. Outside their own countries, the men at the head of these regimes are called dictators. That term is accurate in the sense that their authority is supreme and overruling, but it does not mean that Hitler and Mussolini have subjected reluctant and resentful peoples to their will. They are leaders who rose to supreme authority by embodying the national desire to escape from a condition of inferiority. Their functions are defined by the titles of Führer and Doce that they bear. Both of them have the support and approval of a much greater proportion of their fellow countrymen than has ever voted for the government of any democratic state. They came to power by constitutional methods. Mussolini was invited by the King of Italy to form a government, and Hitler was appointed to the chancellorship by the President of the German Republic. Each began his governmental career as the head of a coalition ministry. The external form of the Constitution has been preserved in both countries. There is still a Reichstag in Berlin and a Chamber of Deputies in Rome. Parliament in each case handed over its controlling power to the organs of dictatorship. This change of governmental method has expedited action and produced an abundant record of achievement. It would be not only unjust but unintelligent to disregard these substantial results and condemn without further investigation administrations which have brought great benefits to the peoples that live under them. The authoritarian regimes of Germany and Italy, while restricting individual freedom of thought and action, have set up a high standard of national welfare. To form a fair judgment of them it is best to begin by studying the character of their creators. Despite resemblances in career, achievement, and situation, there are marked differences between these two dictators. The dissimilarity is well reflected in their respective senses of humor. Mussolini has a keen, sardonic wit which is freely applied to his political preoccupations. His lively eyes dilate still wider when some caustic comment on the international situation suggests itself to his active mind. Hitler's humor is more ingenuous and personal. He is gay and whimsical in the circle of his close friends, but too earnest in his attitude towards public affairs to be jocular about them. Mussolini gives a greater impression of vitality. He uses a high armchair, but seldom leans back in it. His temperament is too vigorous for him to remain long seated at all. Springing up from behind his heavy oak and wood work table, he will carry on a conversation for a half an hour, standing his stocky figure bolt upright, sturdy legs straddling wide apart, and massive head so high that its heavy chin and full pursed lips are thrust aggressively forward. Whereas Hitler speaks only German, Mussolini talks to all foreigners in French, which he uses with ease and fluency. Sometimes he will express himself for a few sentences in English, but he began to learn that language after coming to power, has to talk it slowly and deliberately. He speaks German well, having learned it during the time he spent as a young man in what was then the Austrian province of Trentino. Personal contact with him does not reveal the arrogance and megalomania which many people in other countries believe to be his chief characteristics, unless those terms are to be applied to the emphatic tone and positive manner of one accustomed to impose his point of view. His masterful bearing is a genuine quality of nature and habit, not a pose, and he is too good-humoredly cynical to be a victim of folie de grandeur. Businesslike, quick-witted, instantaneous, and apt in his replies, he conveys the impression of a successful man of the world who is an expert at his job and enjoys doing it. The demeanor of Hitler is very different. He does not lend himself so readily as Mussolini to the give and take of question and answer. rejoinder, and comment. Intercourse with him rather resembles the Socratic form of dialogue. The inquirer propounds a theme, and Hitler enlarges upon it. When more than two people are present, even though they are of his intimate circle, there is no general discourse. Either Hitler talks and they all listen, or else they talk amongst themselves and Hitler sits silent. Mussolini is an eager conversationalist. When a caller at the Palazzo Venezia is already known to him, he will sometimes dispense with a greeting and ask an abrupt question as his visitor is still advancing over the 20 yards of empty marble floor that stretch from the door of his room to his deck. Hitler's manner is formal. He greets his guests with a handshake, the arm held straight and low. His friendly smile is accompanied by a silence which, to a first corner, is disconcerting. Or when his caller is already known to him, he may murmur a quizzical "nah," an interrogative interjection which puts the onus of starting the talk upon the visitor. Mussolini gives the immediate impression of a lively and eager brain reacting to each new stimulus. The temperament of Hitler is more dreamy and introspective. His bearing remains tranquil until his attention is aroused by some political remark. Then his eyes light up, his relaxed frame stiffens, and in a hoarse, somber voice, he pours forth a voluble reply. Hitler's public speeches are long and digressive. Like the style of his autobiography, the Duce talks to the crowd in short, staccato phrases and writes as compactly as if his words were to be carved in stone, whereas Mussolini is objective and practical. Hitler is subjective and mystical. Mussolini delights in complicated reports and official memoranda. Hitler detests them and shuns discussion of administrative detail. The one is a realist, the other is a visionary. Mussolini's mental processes are dominated by facts. Hitler's are governed by ideals. It was a prominent German who once said to me, "You cannot really compare them, for one is rational, the other intuitive." The contrast between their temperaments is reflected in their physique. When the dictators stood side by side, the Duce's visit to Germany in September 1937, Mussolini, though the elder by 6 years, appeared the more vigorous and Hitler the more spiritual of the two. Although the Fuhrer has a slight advantage in height, the powerful frame and massive shaven head of Mussolini give him monumental presence. To attain power was more difficult for Hitler than Mussolini, but as regards their subsequent achievement of setting up an authoritarian regime, the position was reversed. Hitler achieved supremacy in a country where traditions were strong and where caste prejudice had always been predominant. That he should have succeeded in winning acceptance of his will and confidence in his leadership from a nation containing such established institutions as the army, aristocracy, Junkers, and manufacturing oligarchy of Germany is the greatest triumph of personality the world has seen for generations. Once that miracle was performed, he had at his command a first-class government bureaucracy and disciplined and industrious nation. For Mussolini, the way to power was less obstructed, but after setting up his government, he had to overcome many deficiencies in the administrative machine and to deal with a people less accustomed to uniformity and cooperation. Different in type as the two dictators are, they have the common quality of intense conviction. Both are fatalists. Mussolini believes in his star, Hitler in his call by Providence to the political redemption of Germany. This certainty that their names and deeds are written in the book of fate gives confidence and directness to their utterances. Both of them are emphatic in expressing the desire to be on better terms with Britain, but they have their own ideas of what such terms should be, and their patriotic ardor would transform this attitude into one of antagonism if they became convinced that Britain were an immovable obstacle in the path of their national aims. To some extent, that impression has already been created in their minds as a result of the British government devotion to the idealistic principles of the League of Nations Covenant. If Great Britain had reserved to herself more liberty of independent action and had used it to negotiate directly with the dictators, Europe might be a safer place today. The wisdom, resource, experience, and prestige attributed by foreign opinion to British statesmen lost their effectiveness on being thrown into the common stock at Geneva. When the League was brought into existence, these authoritarian states were unforeseen phenomena. Britain would have been in a better position to ensure peace if she had dealt with them by those pragmatical and opportunist methods which she applies to her imperial affairs, instead of subordinating her international policy to a cosmopolitan council and to the utopian conception of collective security. Fancies have been allowed to prevail over facts, and only those visionaries who prefer shadow to substance can be satisfied with the result. The result has brought about a combination of two countries, each of which was well disposed towards us and less well disposed towards the other. When Hitler and Mussolini met in June 1934, it is no secret that their first contact failed to inspire them with mutual regard. Hitler thought Mussolini theatrical. Mussolini found Hitler egotistic. The lack of sympathy developed into an all but open quarrel when, 6 weeks later, Austrian Nazis attempted a coup d'etat in Austria and killed Chancellor Dollfuss, who had recently been Mussolini's guest and whose wife and children were staying on the day of his death with the Italian dictator's family. Italy massed troops on the frontier, and if Germany had then been as strong as now, Austria might have become a battlefield. The crisis, but that first symptom of the ultimate Nazi aim to embody Austria in the Third Reich, set Italy seeking the support of France and Britain. Mussolini joined with the British and French premiers at the Stresa Conference in censuring Germany for her repudiation of the military clauses of the Versailles Treaty early 1935. Then came the Abyssinian War, which broke up the Stresa front. By refusing to join the sanctioned blockade of Italy, the German government earned Mussolini's gratitude. In July 1936, the outstanding issue of Austrian independence, which had hitherto separated these two countries, reached a state of truce in the form of an agreement negotiated between Germany and Austria. The way was open for a reconciliation between the two dictators. The occasion for this was provided by active intervention of the Soviet government in the civil war in Spain. Moscow threw all its energies into the task of fulfilling Lenin's prophecy that Spain would be the next European country to go Bolshevist. This effort, if successful, would soon have spread to France, bringing a vastly increased Bolshevist menace right up to the frontiers of Germany and Italy. Instinctively and automatically, rather than by design, the two authoritarian states formed a partnership to avert that danger. Italy's activities in these undertakings raised the question of the naval control of the Mediterranean under a critical aspect. Mussolini is desperately determined that his country shall not be a prisoner in her own home waters. He suspects the British government of the intention to keep her in some such condition. That belief is strengthened by the conviction that Britain will never forgive Italy for carrying through the conquest of Abyssinia, undeterred by the concentration of the British fleet at Alexandria and by the League campaign of sanctions. The Italian mind is haunted by the apprehension that the British government may someday take a delayed revenge for the dispatch of Italian forces against its will, first to eastern and then to the western end of the sea, which was so long under the naval domination of Britain. Necessity makes strange bedfellows, and though Italy still fears Germany's long-standing ambition to reach the Adriatic and extend her influence throughout the Balkans, Mussolini turned to her for support and concluded an agreement for which he invented the indefinite name of the Rome-Berlin Axis. The Germans had also been hitherto reluctant to pledge themselves to cooperation with Italy, whose resources and reliability as an ally did not overestimate. The pacts with Mediterranean peoples were moreover not contemplated by the Nordic principles of the Nazi Party. The German government, like the Italian, would have preferred to reach a solid understanding with Britain if this could have been arranged on terms acceptable to Germany. The British government, however, held firmly to its engagements with France, which were given a more positive form when the German army preoccupied the Rhineland. France, seeing in Germany her internal enemy and largely influenced by lavish Bolshevist propaganda, had no intention of easing the German position by giving up her military alliance with Russia. As the Spanish War went on, the Rome-Berlin axis grew constantly stronger. In the Non-Intervention Committee, the representatives of Germany and Italy formed a close combination, consulting together before each meeting. At length, when Mussolini visited Germany in 1937, this axis became an alliance in everything but the same. Hitler and Mussolini exchanged public pledges of fidelity before 1 million Germans assembled in the Berlin Olympic Stadium and on the great open space surrounding it. The Fuhrer announced that between the two authoritarian countries there henceforth existed not only unity of view but unity of action. The Dulce declared the National Socialism and Fascism had everywhere the same enemies who served the same master, the Third International, and that when he and Fascist Italy had a friend, they would march together with him to the end. This visit was brought about by the initiative of Germany. The friendly letter which the new British Premier, Mr. Neville Chamberlain, sent to Mussolini had aroused the apprehension that Italy might be induced to leave her new association with Germany and return to the Stresa front. The German government desired to demonstrate that Germany and Italy must be dealt with as a group and could not be divided. The occasion was taken to display to Mussolini the might of Germany in its political, military, aerial, and industrial aspects under the most impressive conditions possible. It was indeed announced that he came as leader of the Fascist Party and not as head of the Italian government, but in Germany and Italy there is no real distinction between party and state. From the German people, Mussolini received a flattering reception, all the more congenial to him as this was his first personal contact with any other nation since the year 1922, when his regime began. In this friendly atmosphere, the frigid relations between the two dictators resulting from the events of 1934 thawed into cordiality. A new joint in the highly strained articulation of Europe was formed on that evening of September 28, 1937, when Hitler and Mussolini, under streaming rain, proclaimed their union of sympathies and aims to the vast ocean of faces beneath them, which, in the alternative glare and gloom of the floodlights, looked like a Gustave Doré picture of the Day of Judgment. Mussolini himself has estimated the dead in another European war at 10 millions. It was a grim reflection that the huge multitude before one's eyes was but 1/10 of that total. In the authoritarian countries, the only deciding factors are the will and prestige of the two dictators. These factors Mussolini emphatically associated in a joint international policy, which may well be completed by Italy's adhesion to the already existing anti-communist pact between Germany and Japan. If the exchange of personal pledges between Hitler and Mussolini means that Italy is committed to playing a role of a brilliant second to Germany, this new lineup in Europe may lead to war. The only way to mitigate that risk would be to expand the Italo-German agreement into another four-power pact. Such was signed between Germany, Italy, France, and Britain in July 1933, and to enlarge it by bringing Poland within its scope.